So, with that being said, how many of you here in this room would know what I am talking about if I were to say Barney the Purple Dinosaur? Excellent. For the blessed, the most blessed among us, who need an explanation, Barney was a man in a 7-foot-tall purple felt Tyrannosaurus Rex costume who had a television show with 2 other dinosaurs that was on for something like 15 years, who taught children lessons about love and kindness and friendship and community. And there are few figures from the 90s more divisive than Barney the Purple Dinosaur. When I mentioned his name, in fact, I could see waves of revulsion moving backward through the pews on some. He was a very, very polarizing figure in our time. It was a very popular television show, I'd like to mention, Barney and Friends. Millions and millions and millions of viewers on for so long. In 1993, the second year that it was in its second season, Barney was the 3rd highest paid actor in America, behind Steven Spielberg and Oprah. And he was a man in a purple dinosaur costume. Oh my gosh. But for as much success as Barney and his producers enjoyed, there was, as you have noticed, an equal amount of disdain, just loathing for not only this dinosaur, but this show that he had and the lessons that he taught everyone. And I think the reason for this sort of disdain for Barney and his very tame hijinks was the saccharine, sticky, sweet, lollipop gumball schlock of the half-hour show and the life lessons. This sort of eye-rolling, skin-crawling, shake your head and walk out of the room, lovey-dovey, corny adventures. It was like La La Land when you watched the show. There was a song. I'm not going to sing it, because I know that you're already singing it in your mind. A simple song about love, about loving me and loving you, about warm hugs, good hugs, and a kiss from me to you. But it was this sort of saccharine stickiness that people just felt this absolute repulsion to, almost instantaneous, like just rejecting this. I cannot handle it. And I think whether or not you get it from Barney, we all have experienced that at some point to some degree in our lives. Something that is just so sweet, so ooey gooey, kind and friendly that you feel your skin crawl. You cringe a little bit and you think, okay, that's fine. You walk away from it. That bright sort of disposition, happy stories of togetherness and kindness and love that are just frankly all a little bit too put on, too sweet even for the sweetest of tooths out there. This kind of love that people sort of pushed away against, saying no. I don't want that. I'm not going to participate in that. It was a very polarizing time in children's media. And I've been thinking a lot about that kind of love because love, it is everywhere in our media. It is a part of everything from business, from greeting cards, television shows, songs, radios, advertising. You see it everywhere. This certain brand, flavor, shade of love that is endlessly used to push things onto us, products, ideas, people, whatever it may be. Glitter glued to Hallmark cards in the CVS aisle. This kind of love is everywhere. But let's pause talking about Barney and rewind time, some 1,200 years rewind time, back to about the year 700-800 CE, to what will become Iraq, to a woman named Rabia of Basra, who is actually on the cover of your bulletin, and a painting of her. Rabia of Basra wrote in the wilderness and the desert around the town where she grew up, Basra. And after her death in 800 CE, over the generations, her works, her poetry, both her original works and those things attributed to her, elevated her status to that of wali, which is like a Muslim spiritual protector of the faith. We would call them a saint. Elevated her to this level within the Muslim faith. She was also an important mystic within the Sufi tradition and quite possibly the most important woman writer of the ancient Near East of her time. Before that, though, before she went into the desert to live an ascetic life, to write and pray endlessly, before that, though, her life was marked with extreme hardship. As a child, she was stolen, sold into slavery. Then as a teenager, she was sold to a brothel for many years, until finally buying her freedom at the age of 50, which is when her work truly began to be put down. Translator and author Daniel Ladinsky writes this about her. Rabia may be a timely spiritual voice for all people who have ever suffered the degradation of unwanted touch. She was both physically and sexually abused from an early age, yet still became one of the greatest woman saints and poets known to Arab history. Her work echoes today. She was writing some 500 years before Rumi, and Rumi often cited her as inspiration. And what defines Rabia's body of work is a deep, descriptive, sensuous love, one that she kindles and nurtures within her, one for God. From the most mundane to the most terrible to the most joyful, she seeks out this mutual love that comes from God, wraps her hands around it, one that holds her as she holds it, a love that is at once intimate and personal and precious, and also cosmic, wide, and encompassing everything from, in her own words, from the moth to the moon to her own suffering. She once wrote, "I know about love the way the fields know about light, the way that forest shelters, the way an animal's divine raw desire seeks to unite with whatever might pleases its soul without a single strange thought of remorse. How will you ever find peace unless you yield to love the way the gracious earth does to our hand's impulse?" Her understanding of God's love for her was one that grounded her deeply and gave her strength too, because it was a love that she trusted completely. It was one that was strong enough and attentive enough to bear her questions that rose out of a life very challenging. She wrote, completely unabashed or afraid, "There is a dog I sometimes take for a walk and turn loose in a field. And when I can't give her that freedom, I feel in debt. I hope God thinks like that and is keeping track of all the bliss he owes me." In her writing, as in her life, Rabia was bold in bringing her pain into the same circle as divine love, because she knew that any force strong enough to mend the injuries of the human heart was in fact the most powerful force in all creation. Nothing is heavier than it, nothing is stronger than it, that she could bring the sorrow of 50 years and find herself floating on clouds. That anything capable of sewing back together the shattered and scattered pieces of a life was worthy of chasing and wrestling for, worthy of not giving up or giving over to simple, unexamined prose or pithy ideas. This was a love whose foundation sank to the very bottom of her heart and foot of the earth, something that she could depend on wholly. And this too is the lesson, the wisdom of Hosea this morning in chapter 11, written a little bit before Rabia. When Hosea turns his metaphor from the divine marriage to the divine parent and child, when God's hot anger is kindled up against treacherous Israel, as it has been happening for the 11 chapters before it, all of a sudden the rage, the outrage of it all melts helplessly in the face of the one thing stronger than God's anger, which is God's love. As a parent to their wayward child, though that anger rises, it is cooled and tempered by a love that stands taller over everything. And God laments through the prophet, "How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? How could I make you like Admah? How could I treat you like Zeboim? My heart, God's own heart, my heart recoils within me, and my compassion grows warm and tender." We often hear about the anger of God in the Bible. It is a P next to the mountain of God's love. Hosea and Rabia knew and communicated this through the centuries, that love, God's love, is an earnest and powerful thing, that it can break the chains that keep us in misery and in loneliness. It can create new futures and new pathways for us. It can save our lives if we reach out and we accept it. There is temptation every day to let love be reduced to pithy phrases and sentiments, catchy songs, glitter. To let it be red hearts and corny movies, a somewhat limp afterthought in our lives. It's nice if you can get it. However, love is anything but. It is the foundation on which we all stand and can return to, the place of security from which we can launch forward in boldness and in courage, the place of strength that we can go to when all comes tumbling, cracking, falling down around us. The thing more powerful than God's anger that can and has and will save the world and our very lives. So let us step out in the confident boldness of divine love, to let ourselves be strengthened and grounded by its power, to not surrender it to a caricature of what it truly is, an inspiration, a healing blessing that will ultimately and forever sustain all that we see. Amen.